morning. Welcome to the Morning Momentum. Today being Thursday, 5th of September 2024. This is a daily compendium of local and international news, human interest stories, current affairs and expert opinion. Use the hashtag The Morning Momentum at Younib MEDIA TV at Alfonsoh Albakwekwe. I am your host, Alfonsoh. Let's take a look at the top stories on the papers this morning. We start with the Standard newspaper. Proposed revenue law raises a storm. Now, the Council of Governors has raised objections to the proposal by the Commission for Revenue Allocation to reduce the weight of population while increasing that of land in its revenue sharing formula that will see 24 counties lose billions. That story is beefed up for you on page 4. Now, the losers include the following counties: Mandera County, Kakamega County, Kilifi, Kwale, Bungoma, Meru, Narok, Nairobi, Machakos, and Nakuru counties. On the other end, the winners are Marsabit, Turukana, Kajiado, Garissa, Laikipia, Busia, Bomet, Isiolo, Elgeyo Marakwet, and Taita Taveta. Now, 33% is the population weight, which the new formula says population of a county carries a weight of 33% in the sharing and 23% poverty levels. If a county is rated lowly in the poverty index, it stands to gain more. 24 counties will see their revenue drop by a cumulative 12 billion Kenya shillings. That story is beefed up for you on page 4. On page 6 this morning, Indian leaders wade into Adani airport deal. Also on page 10, China reaps most in ties with Africa. That story is beefed up for you on page 10. On page 7, Raila calls presidents in China to back his AU bid. Now, former Prime Minister Raila Odinga yesterday pitched his African Union Commission chairperson candidacy to 6 African presidents attending the China-Africa Summit in Beijing, China. That story is beefed up for you on page 7. On page 8, sticky issues as teachers troop back to schools. We'll take a look at that in a few. Now, let's take a look at page 2 of the Standard this morning. And we start with the story of "She was not your wife. Judge tells man seeking to end 22-year reunion." Now, JTO could not provide evidence of Luo marriage rituals. Judge also says after rituals, there ought to be papers. Now, 22 years is how long a man cohabited with a woman. He was unable to prove that they were married under Luo customary laws. That story is beefed up for you on page 2. On page 3, Iranian Paralympics volleyballer struggles to find bed big enough. Now, 8-foot player was planning to sleep on the floor before a bed was finally found for him. The second tallest living man in the world was diagnosed with a rare condition that leads to the production of excessive growth hormones. That story is beefed up for you on page 3. Let's move on and take a look at page 4. Some counties to lose billions in new proposals on revenue sharing. Council of Governors rejects formula that could see counties gain as others lose revenue allocation. Commission on Revenue Allocation proposes a major shift in the parameters used to determine who gains what. That story is beefed up for you on page 4. Let's move on and take a look at page 5. Senate calls on audit of counties' revenue amid corruption claims. Auditor General was urged to do independent audit instead of relying on what counties declare. The office depends on available documents presented by counties. That story is beefed up for you on page 5 of the Standard this morning. On page 6, CS Mutua to avail Adani deal as Indian Congress doubts group. Now, the CS promised to workers they will be availed with all documents by Friday this week. The workers have raised concerns that the deal is being carried out in secret. That story is beefed up for you on page 6. The proposal is 30 years duration. Adani Group seeks to take over JKA in a plan that includes changing aviation laws and policies to limit competition and maximize profits. That story is beefed up for you on page 6. On page 7 this morning, Raila in China quotes 6 African heads in his AUC candidacy. Now, The Forum on China-Africa Cooperation brings together several presidents offering the chance for campaign. He hopes to boost his numbers and secure 2/3 of the 49 countries that will vote in February next year. We'll catch up with that on page 7. Let's move on and take a look at page 8, why teachers' promotions is a sticky issue for employer unions. TSC recently unveiled automatic promotions policy aimed at tackling job stagnation. Teachers want promotions based on merit, seniority, vacancies, academics, and qualifications. That is a story making the headlines on page 8 this morning. On page 9, report reveals bandit killed over 300 in 1 year and cites new trends. Study on 13 counties show cattle rustling, now a commercial enterprise organized by powerful people. Report blames illegal arms, illiteracy, poverty, and the government's inability to reluctance to provide security. That story is beefed up for you on page 9. In numbers, 13 counties is the number of devolved units that were covered in the study, and most of them are found in the North Rift. Now, let's take a look at page 10, why China reaps the most benefits in its dealings with Africa. Africa lacks a proper strategy towards China on trade and investment. This, despite that the forum is meant for equal, and why China reaps its dealings with Africa. We'll catch up with on page 10 of this morning. On page 11, Masengeli facing fires at Skanja awaits nod. Now, acting police boss has been in office for over a month. His short stint has been marred by several controversies. That story is beefed up for you on page 11. Let's take a look at page 12 this morning. 20 jobs agencies deregistered amid claims of protection by top officials. Now, some deregistered agencies attempt to seek fresh listing using name. Agencies
Je, wewe ni mfanyabiashara katika sekta ya elimu, afya bora, usafiri ama unamiliki kampuni yoyote ile? Ungependa kupata fursa ya kutangaza biashara yako ili kuwafikia wateja zaidi? Usikonde. Runinga ya Younib inakupa fursa ya kupeperusha matangazo kuhusu bidhaa na huduma unazotoa kwa bei nafuu. Kwa maelezo zaidi, wasiliana nasi kupitia nambari za simu 0750344700 ama kupitia barua pepe marketing@younibtv.com. Jinyakulie leo. Younib TV, ever the best.
Well, we apologize for that technical hitch. Let's move on and take a look at the expert opinion on the Standard this morning. It's tough being public relations manager for Kenyan politicians. Managing public relations for political outfits, it's no mean feat, at least in Kenya. It's a demanding job that requires more than just the typical PR toolkit. It demands an intricate understanding of power dynamics, quick thinking, and often a willingness to compromise ethical boundaries. That opinion is beefed up for you on page 14. Now, let's move on and take a look at page 16. How Raila's dalliance with Ruto might influence 2027 contest. President William Ruto's endorsement of Raila Odinga's candidacy for African Union Commission and the inclusion of Raila's close ally in the broad-based government could have significant implications for the 2027 elections. By supporting Raila for the key role at the AUC, Ruto may be cultivating goodwill between them. This strategy could help establish a cooperative relationship, potentially decreasing the chances of Raila proposing a serious opposition threat in 2027. That story is beefed up for you on page 16. On page 17, worthy lessons for Kenya and all developing countries from China on economic development. You have that comprehensively covered for you on page 17. Let's take a look at county news on the Standard this morning. Wamatangi's 5 billion roads project to ease traffic nightmare in Thika. Governor says multi-agency team seeks to make Thika a city. Superhighway made Thika town attractive to many. That story is beefed up for you on page 18. Let's take a look at page 19. Floods kill one, displaces tens of families amid calls for state help. Senior catechist swept away by storm water. Residents seek government support as learning is disrupted. Let's take a look at Taita Taveta County briefly. It gets a new lands boss. Now, County Director of Education, of Adult Education, Christine Zige, is the new substantive lands executive. This was after members of the Assembly approved the report of the Committee on Appointment after vetting for the position of County Executive Committee Member of Lands. In Naivasha County, mental health crisis deepens. Cases of mental health among pregnant women and teenagers are on the rise due to increased cases of abusive relationships. This emerged during a clinic for pregnant women organized by Donyo Healthcare Clinic targeting women from low-income households. In Migori County, teachers fault union for ending strike. Now, teachers have faulted the Kenya Union of Post-Primary Teachers for calling off the strike. Led by Migori Kuppet Executive Secretary General Samuel Orwa, the teachers accused the leaders of going behind their back to call off their strike. And they say, and I quote, "We are disappointed by the decision made by the National Executive Board of unilaterally calling off the strike," end of quote, Orwa said. Now, let's move on and take a look at business news. Auditor General wants closure of illegal bank accounts at counties. Gathungu says multiple accounts contribute to financial mismanagement and waste of taxpayers' funds. Some of the counties with the highest number of bank accounts include Bungoma, Migori, and Machakos counties. That story is beefed up for you on page 20. On page 21, intensive Equity staff share sale plan inches closer as it awaits CMA green light. Equity Bank employees will soon have the opportunity to own cheap shares in the Tier 1 lender through an employee share ownership plan ESOP. That story is beefed up for you on page 21. Now let's move on and take a look at international news. No preaching and other tactics as China woos African leaders. China's aim is to show African leaders that we are in the same boat. We are all victims of Western imperialism. It avoids the dreariness of the US and the EU's ongoing aid focus with its attendant conditionally. You want to catch up with that on page 24. Now, on page 24, still conflict, injured wine to face surgery, lawyer says. Ugandan opposition leader Bobi Wine will undergo a surgery, his lawyer said on Wednesday, a day after suffering a leg wound during a chaotic incident in which his party reported initially he was shot. That story is beefed up for you on page 24. On page 25, Chinese enterprises eye Kenyan market in new plan. The number of Chinese enterprises operating in Kenya has hit 400, and these businesses have been instrumental in elevating China to one of the Kenya's largest trading partners. Also, still on page 25, Expo 6 to power Kenya's manufacturing sector. Nairobi is set to host an international industrial expo that will bring together industry leaders, government officials, and stakeholders from across the globe to explore the latest trends, products, and services during the region's industrial growth. That story is beefed up for you on page 25. Let's move on now and take a look at sports news on the Standard this morning. And we start with this story. Tiafoe, Freeze and Navarro boost home hopes at US Open tourney. An American man will be in the final of the US Open for the first time since 2006 when Roderick lost to Federer. Navarro beat Spain's Badosa to book slot in the semifinals where she faces Sabalenka. Now, this is all about tennis. Let's take a look at cricket a little bit. Pakistan cricket hits rock bottom with Bangladesh defeats. You want to catch up with that on page 37. On page 38, Chebet ready to show the way to glory once again in Diamond League. Olympic bronze medalist Mary Moraa will be the sole Kenyan star in the women's 800 meters. Timothy Cheruyot and Reynold Cheruyot will be facing Jacob Ingebrigtsen in 1500 meters showdown. Let's move on to page 39. Smith recovers from collapsed lung to claim Paralympic gold. U.S. athlete powers to victory in 100 meters freestyle S3 at the Paralympics in Paris. She suffered a collapsed lung in 2022 and the idea of competing again seemed impossible. But now she has emerged victorious. That story is beefed up for you on page 39. Still in Paralympics, Nepal's first medalist received hero's welcome. Now, Nepal gave their first Paralympic medalist a hero's welcome yesterday as cheering crowds stand out of Taekwondo star Palesha Govardhan's returns home. That story is beefed up for you on page 39. On the cover page of the Standard this morning, Olunga doubtful as Firat's Harambee Stars prepare for Zimbabwe test. Kenya will host the 2025 AFCON qualifiers opener in Kampala. In June, the national team played against Ivory Coast and Burundi in Malawi. That story is beefed up for you on page 40. Now, with that story, we take a quick break here on the Morning Momentum, and then we come back with the top stories making the headlines on the Daily Nation. Don't go away. See you on the other side of this broadcast.
Je, wewe ni mfanyabiashara katika sekta ya elimu, afya bora, usafiri ama unamiliki kampuni yoyote ile? Ungependa kupata fursa ya kutangaza biashara yako ili kuwafikia wateja zaidi? Usikonde. Runinga ya Younib inakupa fursa ya kupeperusha matangazo kuhusu bidhaa na huduma unazotoa kwa bei nafuu. Kwa maelezo zaidi, wasiliana nasi kupitia nambari za simu 0750344700 ama kupitia barua pepe marketing@younibtv.com. Jinyakulie leo. Younib TV, ever the best.
Welcome back to the Morning Momentum. If you are just joining the conversation, you are rolling with the host with the most, Alfonsoh is my name. Use the hashtag the Morning Momentum at Younib MEDIA TV at Alfonsoh Albakwekwe. Let's take a look at the Daily Nation. The front page, Raila retires. Now, the Orange Party is planning for Odinga's exit as early as next month. For nearly 2 decades, former Prime Minister Raila Odinga has been the undisputed leader of the Orange Democratic Movement, but he will soon call it quits as he eyes the African Union Commission chairperson seat. That story is beefed up for you on page 4 and page 5 of the Daily Nation this morning. On page 7, KRA chair sought special deal for his children to buy cars. A former senior manager at the Kenya Revenue Authority says she was sacked last year for refusing to grant preferential treatment to the children of KRA chairman Anthony Mwaura during auction of cars at the port of Mombasa. On page 10, Tigania cult. Meru pastor radicalized followers and sexually exploited women. Now, on the cover page, new rules to curb exam cheating, assessments set to start next month. That story is on the cover page. Now, let's take a look at page 2 of the Daily Nation. From private jet to U.S. jail, case against murder suspect. Now, long arm of the law caught with Margaret Mbitu. Margaret Mbitu's body had deep knife wounds to the face and neck, according to police in the United States. Kevin Kinyanjui Kang'ethe, who is 40, is said to have killed his girlfriend in the U.S. and left her body in a vehicle before flying to Nairobi. That story is beefed up for you on page 2. Now, let's move on to page 3. How Nithi Bridge horror shattered the dreams of 18 single mothers. PCEA Chogoria Hospital sends medics to the bridge whenever an accident happens. Passengers in the other 2 vehicles say the van ahead was speeding when it collided head-on with a pickup. That story is beefed up for you on page 3. Let's move on and take a look at page 4 on the Daily Nation this morning. And that lands us to Raila set to retire from ODM leadership as he swaps Kenyan for African politics. While some sources inside the party say the veteran opposition leader will soon relinquish his seat to focus on AUC campaign, other party leaders say it is still too early to begin discussing Odinga's replacement. Mr. Odinga was recently officially unveiled as Kenya's candidate in the African Union Commission chairmanship contest. That story is beefed up for you on page 4 and page 5 of the Daily Nation this morning. Let's take a look at page 6. Ruto's China visit, same message, different tone. Now, President has prepared more Western leaning since coming to power. Kenya is hoping to get funding from China to finance major infrastructure projects, including rail and road. That story is beefed up for you on page 6. Let's take a look at page 7. KRA chair sought car deal for his children, says ex-manager. Authority says sacking done lawfully. Ex-staff consented to terms and conditions. In a petition, Muriithi claims that her refusal led to dismissal from work in August last year. Now, also still on page 8, Ruto pushes for consensus on issues whose Chinese visitors. President William Ruto pitched for consensus building on green energy growth and peace initiatives on day 2 of his trip to China, saying they are key enablers in the development of societies. That story is beefed up for you on page 7. On page 8, 134 DCI officers prompted after uproar. Now, National Police Service Commission boss defense promotions says they were above board. Elevation of officers who had stagnated for years follows protests that nepotism influenced the initial list. That story is beefed up for you on page 8. Let's take a look at page 10. Pastor radicalized followers and sexually exploited women. Church members says Mururu would slaughter a goat and draw a sign of the cross on their foreheads and tongues using a bloodied finger. Women who attempted to criticize the man of God were threatened with curses, detectives say in a report. That story is beefed up for you on page 10. Let's move on and take a look at page 12. How new power balance could hurt DP Gachagua. Now, Ruto may be banking on Raila's Western Kenya votes should Mount Kenya bolt out of his UDA. Entry of Raila allies in government leaves him exposed as he lacks a political party. That story is beefed up for you on page 12. Now, let's move on and take a look at page 22 here. Here's why developers should factor in lactation spaces in commercial buildings. The Health Act 2017 requires employers to set up lactation space for their employees. The pod is a ready-made space. All an employer needs to do is provide a small area where it will stand. As for the design and the materials used, they can be brought into a building separately and reconstructed on site. That story is beefed up for you on page 22. Let's take a look at international news. Bobi Wine is stable and out of danger, says the lawyer. In other international news, UN happy with Gaza polio vaccine progress. Israel accuses Hamas of using hospitals for military purposes. UN Security Council president says patience are running out. Briefly, in Kinshasa, child mpox cases surges 75-fold in DRC province. Causes of mpox in children and people under the age of 19 in the worst hit province in the DRC Congo have skyrocketed about 75-fold year. Global charity Save the Children says the illness in South Kivu province is spreading more than twice as fast in children as in the general population, according to a new analysis. In Washington, Kamala Harris proposes more tax deductions. Vice President Kamala Harris proposed a tax deduction of up to $50,000 for new small businesses on Wednesday, a tenfold increase over existing relief and her latest economic policy aimed at winning over middle-class Americans after jumping into the presidential race a month ago. All that is beefed up for you on page 25. Let's move on and take a look at business news on the Daily Nation this morning. Private sector recover from Gen Z protests. That story is beefed up for you on page 26. Let's dig in a little bit. Kenya's private sector activity grew in August, the first expansion in 3 months, reflecting easing economic uncertainties after anti-state demos fizzled out. Also on page 26, global firms face probe over Kenyan logistics jobs. CAK has a month to look into price bidding. MPs asks competition watchdog to find out why local players have been locked out. Briefly, Java launches mentorship program. Java House has launched the Kuza mentorship program, an initiative that will empower children with soft skills, academic guidance, and leadership training. In matters finance, CBK eyes 30 billion from reopened September bonds. The Central Bank of Kenya, CBK, is seeking to raise 30 billion from 2 reopened bonds, a 10 and 20-year paper whose sale started Wednesday until September 18th. In terms of resources, Dutch-Kenya plan to fund water projects. Kenya and Netherlands are eyeing joint deals that will allow water utility companies to raise funds from capital markets for expansion projects. That story is beefed up for you on page 26. Now, let's move on and take a look at sports news on the Daily Nation this morning. Now, we start with athletics. Ugandan marathoner Rebecca was troubled. She suffered severe burns from an alleged domestic attack. 33-year-old was forced to change her training base twice to avoid the relationship. That story is beefed up for you on page 33. Let's take a look at page 34. Kenya's sole medalist Ojuka now wants the long jump world crown. Power filter Wawira bench presses personal best to finish 5th. Cyclist Ogada places 11th. That story is beefed up for you on page 34. On page 35, Akumu rallies stars to pick up all points at home in Kampala. Tickets will be sold on match day in Kampala for 571 terraces and 1,725 shillings VIP. A story is beefed up for you on page 31. Now, lastly, on the cover page of the Daily Nation this morning, new guidelines issued to curb cheating in exams. Ministry says prayer days and other activities remain banned. TSC and NEC have made some changes in how national examinations are administered. Also on the cover page, senators want Gathungu to audit revenue farms contracted by counties. Senators are pushing for Auditor General Nancy Gathungu to audit external revenue collection farms contracted by counties following concerns over the accuracy of figures declared. The lawmaker said failure to audit the service providers has opened a loophole where the companies siphon billions of shillings from the devolved units. Now, with that story of Senate wanting Auditor General to audit revenue farms contracted by counties, we come to an end of today's session of the Morning Momentum. Thank you so much for choosing to stay with Younib TV and the Morning Momentum. And we also want to extend our heartfelt gratitude to all those who made this broadcast a success behind the lens, Raphael, Wangila, and the Chief Controller, Anifa, Kavira. See you tomorrow, same time, same place. Until then, do have a beautiful Thursday. I have been your host, Alfonsoh. Bye-bye.